All right, guys, here we have the week 2, day 2 ed puzzle notes here. We got creating a long-lasting government. Remember, you should be getting these notes into your notebook. You should be copying them down and then bringing the class to help with review sheets and also when we're going over material. Chose this picture specifically. You got George Washington here, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, some other founding fathers. And then, more importantly, this right here, we the people being so much bigger. Talk about how that comes from John Locke, the idea of social contract theory. We give up certain rights to gain safety, and that represents that here. Okay. So our first slide, talking about the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution was not our first attempt at government, actually. Some people think it's the Declaration of Independence. No, our first attempt at government was the Articles of Confederation, and we'll talk about that more in class, but it failed because there's a lot of weaknesses. And then what we're going to end up doing is we will start a new government called the Constitution after Articles of Confederation. The U.S. Constitution divides our government into 3 branches. We have the executive branch, which is led by the president, judicial branch led by the Supreme Court, legislative branch led by Congress, and then the idea of dividing all this power is called separation of powers. And the reason we do that is because we're scared of a king. We don't want to give a lot of power to one person, so we divide those powers into 3 branches so not one branch has too much power. The picture here shows you the Constitution, the 3 branches that are created, and what is under each branch. Talk about the Congress. Legislative branch made up of Congress, which is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. We're going to a little more detail on each of these here. First, we got the executive branch. Here's the picture of the White House, very famous. I mean, you've been there. This is led by the president. Currently, is President Trump. And that is in 2020. Then the president serves for four-year terms, max 2 terms. So technically, the most amount of time a president is supposed to serve is 8. There is ways around that. A president can serve over 8 years. If the president was a vice president and the president which he was serving dies, he would then become president, and then he could technically still be elected to 2 terms because realistically he was never elected president the first term. He was the vice president. So there's ways to be in power for more than 8 years, but it's extremely rare in that aspect. The president is responsible for enforcing laws. He's the commander-in-chief. He gives the orders when it comes to attack and when troops go. He nominates judges, which is, he's going to have to do that here soon. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg just passed away over the weekend, and Donald Trump will be responsible for nominating a Supreme Court judge. Now, whether or not that judge gets nominated before election, that is yet to be seen. Another really big thing the president can do, or the executive branch, they can veto laws. The legislative branch can pass a law, and the president can veto it or strike it down if he just seems it's not right or fair. This is an example of checks and balances, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Then we have the judicial branch. This is led by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is made up of 9 judges. An interesting thing, unlike the president who can only serve a total of 8 years, these judges serve for life. The only way they can lose their job is by dying, retiring, or being impeached. This is extremely rare. It's only happened once in history, and it happened in the early 1800s. So realistically, judges lose their job by dying or retiring. Getting impeached is very rare for a Supreme Court judge. Big thing about Supreme Court judges in the judicial branch, they cannot have political party affiliation. They're not Republican or Democrats or Libertarian or whatever party you want to put in there, Green Party. They don't have party affiliation because their job is to look at the law and interpret law. And the reason they serve for life is so they don't have to worry about getting reelected. They can look at the law fairly. If you had to worry about getting elected as a judge, you might look at a law just based on popular decision so you can get reelected. They don't have to worry about that. Again, they just look at the law. They can serve for life. That's why you have a lot of Supreme Court judges who will serve for upwards of 30, 40 years and die well into their 80s and 90s. Doing this, being a Supreme Court judge, is one way a president can carry on his legacy. If you elect 2 or 3 Supreme Court judges, your party's policies will survive for long after the president is gone. And right now, President Trump is possibly getting ready to elect his 3rd Supreme Court judge, and that means 1/3 of the Supreme Court will have been nominated by President Trump, which is pretty much unheard of. Then also judicial branch determines if laws are constitutional or not. This idea is called judicial review. The court case Marbury v. Madison establishes this. It's basically if a law is against the Constitution, the judicial branch will strike it down. We did this in the famous court case in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. Said that, segregation in public schools and public places was illegal, and so segregation had to end by law, according to the judicial branch, because that segregation went against the Constitution. Okay, and then the building right here, this is actually the U.S. Supreme Court, which you can find in Washington, D.C., very close to the Capitol building as well. Next, we have the legislative branch, sometimes called one of the more important branches. They do a lot here. The legislative branch is called Congress and is broken into two different houses. In both instances, in either house, there are no term limits. So you can serve unlimited term limits in the House or in the Senate. This is actually being challenged recently. People are calling for term limits because you'll have senators that are senators or House of Representative members who have been in power, for 30 or 40 years, having the same job. And people question whether they should be able to do that or not. The first branch is the U.S. Senate. It's made up of 100 senators. This comes from the New Jersey plan, which wanted equal representation. You're going to have 2 senators from each state. So no matter how big or small your state is, you get 2. Your term is you serve for 6 years. So you can serve for 6 years, and after 6 years, you have to try to run for re-election. Again, it's unlimited. Okay, and then equal representation for each state. So if we were to add a new state and add 51 states, that new state would get 2 senators. Every state gets 2. On the other hand, you have the U.S. House of Representative members, and that is coming from the Virginia plan, which wanted representation based on population. And there are 435 total House of Representative members. Every state is guaranteed 1. So no matter what, each state gets 1. The rest are decided by population. So depending on the size of your state, depends on how many House of Representative members you actually get. And those House of Representative members are basically elected every 2 years. So you could serve 10 years and be in office for 20 total years. So every 2 years when we vote, pretty much every year in an odd year, we elect the whole entire House of Representatives. Okay, and then here's that picture again, just breaking it down. You have the legislative branch, which is represented by the U.S. Capitol building. Okay, legislative branch is broken into Congress, which is the House of Representatives, and then the Senate on this side. Okay, some other kind of government terms we should probably look at. We really want to know is one is checks and balances. Checks and balances. Each branch can check the other branch to make sure they are not going beyond their power. Most famous check and balance is the president vetoes a law passed by Congress. Okay, so Congress passes a law, the president can strike it down and it won't go through. Okay, one way that Congress can overrule that is if they vote in a 2/3 to overrule the president veto. Realistically, this does not happen much because Congress is pretty much split within reason down the middle between Republicans and Democrats. It'd be very hard to get Republicans and Democrats on the same page right now. Okay, some other very famous checks and balances are listed up here. One that's going to happen here possibly soon is the president will appoint the judge for the Supreme Court nomination, and in return, the legislative branch will either deny or make the appointment. So the president can suggest what judge goes into place, but the legislative branch led by the Senate will confirm or deny that judge. And again, that's happened twice in President Trump's administration, possibly a 3rd time. Okay. Another example of checks and balances is where the where the judicial branch can declare actions by Congress or by the president unconstitutional, meaning laws. Okay, they can't pass laws against the Constitution. Another term here, we got federalism. This is basically where 2 different levels of government share power. Here's an example of that. So the national government makes certain laws, and whatever law the national government or federal government does not make, states can. So for instance, giving an idea, states make laws on driving ages. Okay? They make laws on curfews because it affects local areas. National government makes kind of like some bigger laws like declaring war, and so forth. Again, you can see this right here, kind of what national government does, what the state does, and what they actually share. And this is federalism, kind of, a little balancing act between the two. Federal government, though, is supposed to be on top. It's called the Supremacy Clause. Federal government laws are supposed to override state laws. And the last one we have here is the Bill of Rights. These are the first 10 amendments or additions to the Constitution. When the Bill of Rights are passed, federal government will lose power. So for instance, what that means is in the Bill of Rights, we have freedom of speech and freedom of religion. If we're guaranteed that, that means the federal government cannot take that away. So they don't have the power to do that. So they're going to lose power in the Bill of Rights. Again, you get basic rights to individuals. First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Second Amendment, looking at right to bear arms. I think our next slide here kind of shows you these basic ones. Third, quartering of soldiers has to do with the Quartering Act. Then you have the arrest, and this has to do with writs of assistance early on. You have to have a search warrant. Rights of the person accused of crime, number 5. And there's more to this. These are just very, very basic. Okay. And then you can keep going through here and look at them if you want. Okay. But this will be the slide for this week. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, as always, I hope you guys have a great day.